Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center for GoLocal Live. It's 3 o'clock. I'm your host, Rachel Nunes. I'm here with my first guest of a very full hour. It's Valerie Endress. She's here from Rhode Island College to help us break down all the crazy things going down in Rhode Island politics, a little bit of national politics. It's been a crazy week.
It sure has been.
So welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
So we're about 3 weeks out from Rhode Island's primary, the latest in the country. We're finally there. So where are we at right now in primary season?
Well, in some ways it's a little bit difficult to tell because we don't have as much polling data as we may have in other areas of the country. So on top of that, we have a number of uncontested races, and so that takes away from the tension and excitement of the primary. But it still is marked at the beginning of marks the beginning of the campaign season, and so that in itself becomes really important.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the biggest issues that's been raised ahead of this primary is the lack of debates between on both sides, especially in the governor's race. That there just really hasn't been much. And we spoke a little bit with Patricia Morgan in the past, and she was saying how she, as a candidate, it's very important to get your ideas out there and to show the differences in policy. And coming from an outsider standpoint looking in, and why are they so important to the state, to the people, and to the process?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I can talk later about why probably they have chosen not to debate. But there are important functions to debates. And one that's little known is that debates have a tendency to freeze the campaign until they have the debates themselves, which means that the voters suspend their feelings about the candidates, particularly the undecided, until they watch them in a debate. Without a debate, you just get little dribs and drabs of the candidates. They're more stylized in their talk. When you're talking one-to-one to a person, if they disagree with you, you can walk away without a lot of publicity. And so we learn a lot less about the candidates. We learn a lot less about their policy stance unless we actually have a debate. And Patricia's right, they do contribute to the democratic process. And it didn't used to be that we expected debates, but these days we do.
And so from a candidate's standpoint, does it make more sense to not have a debate and risk maybe having your opponent say something stronger or paint you in a bad light? Or does it make more sense to get out there and say, this is what I'm about?
Almost always the incumbents are in the driver's seats on debates, or the better known candidate or an office holder. And that's what we've seen happen in this, in true to form in this election. So if from the consultant's perspective, you know, it's a logical move for the governor not to have debates because her whole record is under scrutiny. And unlike her opponents, Matt Brown, who's been out of the state for over a decade, what they will talk about is her record, and that puts her on the defensive. And so we see that often incumbents, and it's also an indication, or it could be an indication, that the internal polling numbers are such that she doesn't feel as if she has to debate. And if you have a close election, you'll almost always see the incumbent want to debate. But from the campaign's perspective, the governor campaign's perspective, what it really does is raise the profile of Matt Brown. And of course, she doesn't want to do that. Also, if they suspect that the person might be a good debater or a better debater, they'll back away from the debates. And
do you think the whole PawSox going to Worcester, the kind of failed deal, do you think that has weighed into it at all? Do you think the governor's maybe afraid that that's going to come up and fall on her shoulders?
Well, I would probably think no more than than some of the other issues that come up, whether it's looking at the UHIP issues, the Division of Motor Vehicles. There's a whole host of, if you've been governor for that long, you're going to see a lot of issues that will crop up. And Rhode Islanders aren't shy about talking about what they don't like. And so I would say Paw Sox probably doesn't figure in that, and I imagine they made the decision before the final decision about the Paw Sox.
And so looking at the Republican side as well, why do you think Alan Fung has also been so reticent to engage in a debate?
I think he has internal polling numbers that tell him that he doesn't have to. I could be wrong about that, but that's usually a pretty big indicator. Also, what happens in a primary debate is that if you choose to debate your opponent, what you're doing in essence is giving away your strategies, your major themes, and your performance in the debate. And so if the governor chooses not to debate, then certainly you're not going to see Alan Fung debate. Also, there's this probably discomfort there about how to handle what's happening on the national level. You know, what do you do when Donald Trump is in the news every day and most of it is negative, and you're from the Republican Party? You know, and Charlie Baker in Massachusetts has done a really good job separating himself, and he saw the necessity early to do that. Alan Fung has been more reluctant to talk about that, which leads to Rhode Islanders not knowing where he stands or assume that he supports the president. And all of that leads to greater cynicism for the public. When they don't have debates, they don't have a chance to judge the candidates against each other. And you know, what's interesting is that my research is on debates, and I ran a longitudinal study in 2014, and where we see the likely matchup that will happen this year with Raimondo versus Fung. And one of the things that was really interesting, and I've been doing this since 2004, is that this was the debate in which Rhode Island citizens really questioned the trustworthiness, how candid they were, the truthfulness, and transparency of both of the candidates. And that was after viewing the debates live. And usually they're excited about being there. And what happened is, and that was our first indication of cynicism that would dog both of the candidates, you know, Fung in Cranston and Raimondo at the gubernatorial level. And there's not been a lot to change that since that time.
So if they are the primary winners, do you think another Raimondo-Fung debate is likely?
I would assume so. You know, they may turn down the primary debates because they don't want to give away their strategy, but it would be very difficult to turn down general election debates. If I were a campaign consultant, I probably would argue on both sides to do as many debates as possible in whatever forums you can, because that mitigates against a bad or poor performance. If you only have 2 premier debates, then what it does is put a lot of pressure on the candidates.
Raises the stakes.
Yeah. So I would assume after the primary, my recommendation would be they get out there, they challenge each other to debates. Because I think the Rhode Island citizens do deserve to hear their policy differences, and they really haven't had the opportunity to do that.
Well, it will be very, very interesting to see what happens after the primary. And so turning our focus a little bit more nationally, it's been an absolutely wild week in politics. And so talking a little bit about, we had Cohen and Manafort and all of that, how does that impact Rhode Island?
Well, it does in a number of ways. And Rhode Island has been slow to crawl out of the recession. and people are still hurting in Rhode Island. And it is one of the more cynical states in terms of the citizens and their view against politics. This doesn't help that process. It doesn't help young people to go into the political process. So from that very local level, it certainly does. And the trust or lack of trust that you have of national politicians, because it's not only the presidency, it's Congress too. You know, when are the days when we used to talk about policy and legislation? We just don't do it anymore. It's the latest of what's happening in the Trump administration. For ill or for good, that's what we're talking about. And so it takes the focus away from people's real lives. And they're wondering, what is the federal government going to do for them? And the federal government has to work very closely with the state government. So in some ways, it puts it in a state of paralysis. We're not seeing a lot of movement in the federal government to help Rhode Islanders, and Rhode Islanders still need help.
Absolutely. And so do you think these issues will also trickle down into our election as well? I know you mentioned the issues with the gubernatorial candidates, but just for House and town council and smaller elections as well.
Well, and I hadn't mentioned the lieutenant governor's race yet, and that's getting some national attention because many people see it as a bellwether and the possibility of a break for a progressive candidate to gain statewide office. So that McKee and Regenberg matchup is rather interesting. And I think what will happen and what trickles down from the federal level is the rise of progressives. You know, how strong are they going to be in this election? And how are Republicans going to overcome some of the problems that they have in image because of the national or the Trump administration? So and also it's going to impact turnout. And we don't know which way that's going to go, right? Is it going to bring more people to the midterms, to vote in the midterms? And we'll get a glimpse of that in this primary campaign, particularly, or in this primary vote, particularly with Rhode Islanders.
That does seem to be one of the big themes of this primary race is there's just a whole bunch of progressive candidates who are coming in, progressive incumbents who they really seem to be making a big push here in Rhode Island. And do you think that will have any indication of how things will be nationally, or maybe the other way around, like national politics are affecting locally?
I think it actually will, and we're seeing a number of progressives who have gained seats in the last election in the General Assembly, and we'll see if that trend continues. And what it will do, though, is, or likely to do, is that we're losing our moderates on both sides. And there's in many ways difficult to find a moderate Republican. And with the rise of the progressives, you're going to see more of a push away from centrist Republicans, which in many ways have controlled the states for years. And we've seen some of the battles with Mattiello on this issue. Is he truly a Democrat in the national sense as opposed to the Rhode Island sense? And we see that with a lot of Democrats in Rhode Island, and we have traditionally. Mm-hmm. So a push by the progressives can split the party in some ways, or it can move the centrists further left if they can get a foothold.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating
it sure
primary election. We're all waiting with bated breath to see what happens. What's going to be the matchup for governor? Who's going to be coming into our seats in Rhode Island? It's going to be a fascinating
That's right. Stay tuned. Sure. Stay tuned.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Valerie Endres. We really appreciate your insight, helping us break down everything that's happening both here in Rhode Island and nationally as well. So we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure, Rachel.
And we'll be right back with our next guest here on GoLocal Live. Welcome back to Go Local Live here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We're here now to talk about an issue that seems to affect pretty much everyone, not having enough time to get it all done. So here with us now, Jessica N. Turner. She's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. She's the author of Stretched Too Thin. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your book, Stretched Too Thin. It's definitely an issue that's close to a lot of people's hearts. Seems to be a common theme for working moms, for professionals.
Yeah, so Stretched Too Thin, How Working Moms Can Lose the Guilt, Work Smarter, and Thrive is based on research that I did with 2,000 working moms from across America to learn what their biggest pain points were and struggles as working moms, as well as identify what are some changes that they can make to go from feeling like they're just hanging on and surviving to really thriving. And those areas range from home management and practicing self-care to investing in their marriages, boundaries at work, guilt, shame, and comparison.
So let's talk about some of those big themes, because like I said, this seems to be kind of the big thing for women of, oh, can women have it all? And you're expected to spend all this time with your kids, but you're also expected to have a career. And how can you handle it all while also staying your own person?
Well, I think the important thing to say is that you can't do it all, and that's okay. And to recognize that the word balance isn't really a great word, and so maybe stop thinking about, I need to have this perfect balance, but am I feeling satisfied in these different areas of my life? You know, research shows that the quality time that we spend with our kids matters a lot more than the quantity. So think about when you're with your kids, being able to be really focused and intentional on that time that you have, not be being distracted by technology or by other things that you have going on, by focusing just on them and the conversations you're having with them. I think you'll feel a lot better about your role as a mom.
And so you mentioned maintaining your marriage as well. That seems to be kind of an issue for some people. You spend so much time devoting towards your kids and devoting towards your career, and then suddenly your kids are 18, you go off to college, and you realize, I don't really know who I'm married to anymore. So how can you make sure you carve out time for your marriage as well, as to make sure you focus on that?
I think it's recognizing that can be an issue and making a conscious effort to invest in your marriage, whether that's date nights, having conversations beyond kids' schedules and work schedules, and investing in those marriages just the same way you are investing in other relationships or investing in your work, that you are constantly going back and saying, you know, this is a priority. I need to speak to you with kindness. I need to take time for you to be a priority for me, instead of just kind of living through the day-to-day motions and often kind of being two ships in the night.
Absolutely. And so these ideas, they build a lot off of your first two books, which talks about spending time for yourself. And can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. So my first book was The Fringe Hours, Making Time for You, and then there was a companion gift book that was also available. And that notion was just that oxygen mask philosophy, that you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of everyone and everything else. And that's an important part of Stretched Too Thin as well. 4 out of 5 working moms said that making time for themselves and practicing self-care was something that's difficult. And I think that's because for a lot of us, the easiest thing to cut from our schedules is ourselves, whether that is a doctor's appointment or it's making time to go to the gym. We just say, I'll get to that later. But what happens is, over time, when we keep saying no, no, no to ourselves, we become depleted, we become exhausted, we become angry and frustrated and some of those things. So it's really important to make time for practicing self-care so that you can be the best wife, mom, coworker, and friend that you can be.
And self-care seems to be a big buzzword now, the idea of, oh, I'm going to put on a face mask tonight for self-care, the importance of focusing on self-care. And so what exactly does that mean? Is it different for everyone?
It's a whole lot of things. Self-care is physical care, it's mental care, it's emotional and spiritual care. It's thinking about all of those different areas and taking care of yourself. So it's a lot more than just a massage or a face mask, though that certainly can be part of it. It is making time for your passions, taking care of your body, going to the doctor, making those dentist appointments that you so often cancel. Doing those types of things are also really important. Getting enough sleep, drinking a lot of water, those types of things.
And so you're also you write this fantastic, popular blog. What inspired you to share your story?
I started blogging 12 years ago, so I'm kind of a dinosaur in the blogging world. My site is themomcreative.com, and really it was birthed out of just wanting to communicate with friends and family that were based out of state, and then just slowly grew as my family grew, and mommy blogging became more popular, and now really is a lifestyle destination for a lot of moms. And I think it's because they recognize that I'm telling it like it is, and I'm someone that they can trust. A lot of them have followed my site or my social media for a long time, and have come to trust in what I have to say, and it's a community that I'm so grateful for.
And what are some of your favorite things to write about and to talk about on your blog?
I like to get really honest about working motherhood and about struggles in my own journey. I write a lot about books. I think that reading is something that really unites a lot of people. In the research that I did for the Fringe Hours, I found that the number one thing that moms said that they would want to do if they had more time was read. And so that's true for me, and that's why I love sharing good book recommendations that I am experiencing, as well as a great product.
And talking about some of these things that women can do for themselves, what are some of your top tips, you'd say, if you had to sum your whole book up into just a few minutes? What are some of the top things you can do? Just, a step one, start today. What's something I can do to start, to take back your life and be in control and say, I've got this?
I think a great place to start is to track your time for a week. I don't know that most women realize where their time is going, and this is much more than just the calendaring of the big items that you're doing. It is actually tracking how much time you're spending doing laundry and dishes and carpool pickup and work and all of those things. And when you see that over the course of a week, you can really clearly make some changes to your schedule. You can identify, maybe I don't need to be doing laundry every single day, or you know what, that group that I'm going to once a week, I said yes to that, but it's not something I'm really enjoying. I should take that out of my schedule and make some changes so that you can make your life kind of feel more like you want it to be. You can say no to those things that maybe you said yes to that you shouldn't have, and make some changes. Ask for some help. I think asking for help is another really easy step, because you can start right at home. You can maybe ask your spouse for more help. You can ask your kids for help. You can just say, hey, this is an area that I'm struggling with, and by being honest with that, you can often make a lot of changes in your home that can be really positive for everyone.
I think that's such a great approach. A lot of times it seems that asking for help is seen as weakness, or being like, what, I can't do all of this. It can be seen as not being able to handle it. But in some ways that shows strength to say, no, I need help with this. I can't do it all.
Absolutely. Asking for help is a sign of strength and a sign of confidence. It's also a way to empower other people to help. I think most people want to help, but they don't know how to do that. And so when you say, this is an area that I need help with, you're actually empowering other people as well.
And so talking a little bit about where can we get your book?
You can pre-order it now. It's available wherever books are sold, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, any of those retailers. Target has it as well. You can find all the information on stretchtothinbook.com. And
who would you recommend this book to? It seems like there's definitely a broad audience. So would you say, give it to your friends, even maybe new parents, not necessarily just the person who says, help, I'm really overwhelmed, I need some guidance. It seems like pretty much anyone could take some advice from this and help with the balance.
Yeah, I think that Stretched Too Thin is a perfect book for any working mom, whether she works full-time, part-time, inside the house, outside the house, in corporate America, in a retail setting. Any type of work that a woman is juggling on top of managing a home and family and marriage, I think this is a book that is going to be really relatable and practical and applicable to her life.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. As a working mom yourself, we really appreciate you coming on the show and joining us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Jessica Turner, she's the author of Stretched Too Thin. You can get it coming up in September, just a few weeks. Keep an eye out. You don't want to miss it. And we'll be back in just 1 minute with our next guest here on GoLocal Live. Hi everyone, welcome back to Go Local Live. We're here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center with Nick Audiello.
There we go.
Audiello, my apologies. He's here with us now. Primary's coming up. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Nick is running for Senate seat in District 5
That's
here
right.
in Providence. So you were here in May. Tell us a little bit how things have been going since you've been here.
Things are going really well. So first of all, we have been endorsed by the 17 labor unions of the Rhode Island Building and Construction Trades Council and the political arm of the Providence Chamber of Commerce, which is really exciting because that means both labor and the business community think that I'm the best candidate in my race to move our economy forward, to create jobs, and to build an economy that works for all Rhode Islanders.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so with the primary coming up pretty soon, you feel like you're in pretty good shape? I
feel like we're in good shape. You know, I go out on the doors every day talking to my neighbors. They're ready for change. They're ready for a new direction in Rhode Island. They're ready for younger leadership. You know, they've seen a lot of people stick around the State House for a long time and not accomplish a whole lot of anything. And so they're ready for people with the energy, the passion, and the drive to push for the big kinds of transformational things we need here in Rhode Island.
That's great to hear. And so this is a big race. There's some really big figures being thrown around when it comes to campaign finance. Your opponent, Sam Bell, has about $50,000 in his war chest. Paul Jabor has about 20,000. Your campaign at last check around 42. These are really big figures for a local race. Yeah, they are. And you know, unfortunately, these things do cost money. And when you have an election with 3 viable candidates, it costs even more because you're trying to get your message out. And it's terrible. I mean, I really wish we would go to a system where elections were a lot shorter. Especially, you know, you see presidential elections that go on for 2 years. Even these elections don't need to go on for as long as they do. We could do it in a shorter amount of time, save money. But I mean, I'm proud of a lot of the money we've raised. I've raised more money from Rhode Islanders than both of my opponents combined. So I'm really proud of that. And I think it says a lot when, you know, ordinary people step up to back a candidate. And speaking on campaign finance as well, your campaign did file a complaint regarding the incumbents. We did. Campaign finance. Senator Jabor, kind of just very basically what happened, because these laws are a little arcane. He was very clearly making campaign expenditures when he had an affidavit filed that said that he wouldn't be spending more than $1,000 on any campaign-related expenses in total in 2018. He since has rescinded that, but at the time he was making and putting out materials, it said that he wasn't going to be spending more money than he clearly was. So the complaint was dismissed by the Board of Elections this morning, but I think it speaks to a bigger problem in our campaign finance laws. It shouldn't be hard for us to tell people where our money is coming from and where it's going. And candidates shouldn't try and hide where their money is coming from and where it's going. For example, you know, Senator Jabor just self-funded his own campaign. I wish I had the money sitting around to be able to do that. So it wouldn't have been complicated to just file a piece of paper before spending any money. And that's all we were saying. Let people know where the money's coming from. And so you said these changes need to be made. What do you think would be a better approach to improving campaign finance here in Rhode Island? Yeah, I think especially on campaign finance around ethics, these are things that we can always be doing better at. You know, we've made some progress in Rhode Island. You have to report who donates to you for anyone who donates $100 or more. I've made it a practice of just reporting almost everybody. But transparency is key. Filing is key. Promoting good government, good ethics. You know, there's a lot of distrust in Rhode Island. And for good reason. You know, our leaders in the past have done some really stupid things. So people are rightly skeptical, and the only way that we build the trust back that I think that we need to do the big things in our state comes by elected officials up and down at every level just being proactively transparent with their campaigns and their campaign finance,
and just how they behave once they are in office. You know, there's this thing that happens where, especially with lawyers in private practice in the General Assembly, they'll pass these very obscure laws and then market their own private law firms as the only ones who can solve your problem if you get in trouble with it. And that's just like, that's crazy. These are things that in the 21st century need to end.
And we've been talking a lot about debates at the beginning of the show. We were speaking with Valerie Endres about the importance of debates and why we haven't really seen as many as we thought. Do you think all of the lower level candidates, not necessarily the governor, and do you think everyone should be engaging in debates?
Absolutely. I mean, especially in these lower level races where it's really hard to get press coverage because there's so many of them and there's so much happening. It's hard. You know, if you can follow the governor's race through the newspaper. You can't really follow these smaller races, you know, through the media, through the papers, online, because there's only so much. You guys only have so much bandwidth to cover everything. And so I have called for a debate as soon as the filing deadline was finished. I called for debate in our race. It was roundly ignored by both of my opponents. We then had a candidates forum about 2 or 3 weeks ago at Federal Hill Pizza. Both of them declined to show up. I went and showed up and answered questions, which was a lot of fun. But I think, you know, we have a debate scheduled for the day before the election, and I think that's not fair to voters, especially when there are, you know, 3 candidates with ideas and backgrounds and things that should be debated. And these things shouldn't be debated just, you know, one-on-one at doors with people where you can paint candidates in whatever color you want. You should have to stand up and answer questions. It's not hard.
And why do you think your opponents declined to take part in a debate?
I mean, obviously my opinion is that they know I'm the best candidate and they don't want to be on camera having that shown. No, you know, people make up excuses all the time. I'm too busy, I have other things to do. I don't know, you'd have to ask them.
And so how have you gotten around that? Because when you're in a debate, it's very easy to say, okay, here's what I stand for. Here's my policy. And how have you gotten around that and gotten your message out in other ways?
Well, so we've focused a lot on certainly door knocking and going door to door and talking to people where they are. But we've also focused a lot on social media. That's where a lot of people are nowadays. One of my opponents doesn't even have any presence on the internet, which is bizarre in 2018. But you know, we've released a bunch of ads that we're getting great response on that just kind of outline my views on, you know, things overall, the economy, housing, immigration, you know, the big projects that we need to do. So we're definitely focusing on social media. And over the next couple of weeks, all of the traditional campaign stuff, you know, the signs going up and mailings going out and all of that. So we're confident we can reach everybody.
And so talking a little bit, one of the big things that's happened in the last couple of weeks, the decision over the Pawsox not staying in Pawtucket.
Yep.
It's not your district exactly, but it's right next door. And in Rhode Island, everyone's neighbors.
Yep.
So what kind of an impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, it certainly has a psychological impact, and it's one more in a string of things that feel like Rhode Island is just being beaten down. And it started a long time. I mean, it started right when I was born with the savings and loan crisis, and at one thing after the other, and who's getting arrested, and what company is leaving, and what jobs aren't, all of this stuff. And so this was one more thing. So it hurt. I get that everyone's not a baseball fan, and that exactly how the deal was going to work was certainly subject for robust debate. But once they up and left, I think it showed more than anything else, beyond any of the specifics of the deal, that the way we do business in Rhode Island isn't working. This was a straightforward thing. It shouldn't have taken a year and a half to come to a conclusion. And when other people who might want to invest in Rhode Island see that, they're like, I'm just going somewhere else. I'm not dealing with this. They don't have their house in order. It's crazy. And we need to change that. And I think we changed that with new leadership. So
besides new leadership, what are some concrete things that need to change? Let's say you are elected, you are this new leadership. What can be done to really make a change?
So first, I and I've been talking about this the whole time, the economy. And for me, that falls into a couple of different buckets. And the first is protecting working families. I think we need to, over the next few years, raise the minimum wage because there are too many people in our state who work full-time and can't make ends meet. So that's one thing. We also need to help small businesses, and that is across the board. That's on taxes, it's on regulations, to make them make sense. Protect people, but regulations that make sense. Increasing access to capital. Yeah, go ahead.
Talking a little bit about small businesses, it's interesting you juxtapose that with the $15 minimum wage, because one of the biggest complaints you hear is, I'm a small business, I can't afford that. So how can we help working families, because we don't want anyone to live in poverty, but at the same time, you don't want someone to have to lay off people or limit hours because I can't afford to stay in business and pay my workers.
So we have fallen into this trap where people on different sides of this debate have fallen into, you're either pro-worker or pro-business, and I reject that as completely false. I think we need, but you're absolutely right. My dad owned a small business, and at one point it wasn't supporting our family anymore. I understand how hard it is. How hard it is to make the payroll, how hard it is to cover all your expenses. We have to make it so that our small businesses are growing and attracting more customers and creating new jobs. One way that we do that, tourism has gotten a lot of publicity, but I was very proud while I was working in economic development for the state to have a big role in bringing Norwegian Airlines here to Rhode Island. And I can't tell you, almost every day I'm at a restaurant or a coffee shop or somewhere in my district where there are visitors from the UK and Ireland who wouldn't be here otherwise, spending money in our small businesses. So if we can attract more people to Rhode Island, our restaurants can grow, our shops can grow, but it's more than that too. It's the kind of cutting edge things we should have frankly been doing a long time ago, like investing in R&D in our universities and keeping college graduates here, all of those things that frankly is what fueled Boston's economy. We just dropped the ball. And up in Massachusetts, you go up to Massachusetts, ask, what did you do? They're like, we built Harvard and MIT and waited 200 years. Well, we have Brown and RISD and URI. We need to be aggressively investing in them, which is also why one of the other projects I worked on that I'm very proud of. In 2016, voters approved an innovation campus proposal on the ballot, and I worked on turning that into reality to help universities and businesses come together, create new R&D, commercialize that, and turn that into companies and jobs that are here in Rhode Island. And we need to do more of that.
And speaking a little bit about universities keeping grads here, do you think the governor's plan for free tuition helps keep college graduates, college students, all of that talent? Do you think it helps keep them here? I
do. And I think that this is an issue that gets real heated real fast. Because everyone goes up in arms. This isn't about, well, I had to pay for college, so should these kids. It now costs about 3 times as much to go to college today as it did when I was born, which is 3 times the hours you would have to work in order to work your way through college. It's just impossible. And it's not the fault of students, it's not the fault of parents, it's the fault of politicians who have kicked the can down the road, let these costs skyrocket. And for example, I have over $100,000 in student debt. And that curtails my ability to buy a home, to make other investments in my life. And this is just a problem we need to solve, and there needs to be a cutoff point. The economy's just changed. At one point, we didn't have public high school. And no one is asking to be sent a bill for high school the way some people are asking, well, you can send them a bill for college. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is you don't need a 4-year degree to get a good job. Our leaders in the past have done a real disservice to our students by forcing everyone into this mentality that if you don't go to college, then somehow you're worth less. And that's not true. But what you do need is some degree or credential past high school. You need trade school, career and tech education, an apprenticeship. There's a lot of building finally happening in Providence, but there's a shortage of construction workers. And those are good jobs with good benefits that we should be helping kids get the skills they need to get those to. So I think it's an all of the above approach, and we can't let anything fall off the table.
And how can we help guide our students better, particularly in your district in Providence, but across the state as well? How can we help our schools and our students to take this new approach of not everyone has to go to college, or if you do want to go to college, here's how it can be affordable, or here's a way to explore a trade. what are some of the ways we can invest in our schools and help with that?
Yeah, so in my district, most of the students are Latino. And a report came out a few months ago that showed that Latino youth have the worst prospects in Rhode Island of any state in the country. And to me, that is a huge, huge, huge problem, because we are just consigning a huge part of the population to not getting the education they need, and that'll have ripple effects for decades. So I think part of it is a mentality change. We have to take the stigma away from working in the trades and working in manufacturing, because there are a lot of good, dignified jobs there. We do have to invest in schools. Obviously, that's a thing every politician says, but especially the buildings. They're falling apart. I was in Mount Pleasant High School a couple of weeks ago, and it's falling apart. So you have to fix that. And then you got to give teachers the room to embrace their students and help them become creative, productive citizens. There's another thing that people don't talk about a lot, that we've spent a lot of time shuffling kids into math and science and engineering, and that's all super important. We need that. But as automation becomes more and more of a force in our economy, we're going to need workers who really have the human skills that can't be automated, who have the creativity, the critical thinking skills. We have to put as much focus on that as we do on math and science, and a lot of that comes through the arts and drama and theater and music, and making sure kids have exposure to that and not cutting those things as the first thing on the chopping block. So again, this is a big topic. There's a lot to do, but especially on education, my approach is always going to be all of the above.
Well, definitely a lot of food for thought there.
Yes.
Thanks so much for coming with us, sharing your thoughts. And of course, best of luck in
Thank you very much.
In the primary. Things are heating up. It's coming up soon. So.
Almost there. 3 more weeks, everybody.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back with our next and final guest of the hour in just 1 minute here on GoLocal Live. We're back in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center, continuing the talk about education here in Providence. We're here now with Bob DeRobio. He is running for mayor of Providence. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
So today was a big day for you. You had a big press release talking about the deficiencies in English language programs here in Providence.
It was talking about a complaint that was filed with the Department of Justice in 2016 that cited a number of irregularities within the department. Yes, so it's really a day where decisions have to be made within the school department and within the city as to what they're going to do and how to deal with these deficiencies for English language learners.
And so talk to us a little bit about the complaint. What were some of the things people cited as not being done?
The parents in the complaint had cited that, number one, they were deprived of services because their children were taken out of certain services that the parents had actually signed paperwork to waive those services for their children. There was a deficiency in the fact that the number of teachers were not adequately certified to deal with the students. There were deficiencies in that administrators were not trained to properly handle them. And initially that there were deficiencies in that parents had to make a decision if their child was in special education and also an English language learner as to what services they wanted because of the place or the building that they were situated in.
And so what kind of an impact does this have on the children of Providence?
When the decision goes back to looking at those children that had come through the system from 2012, 2013, to see what services they were deprived of, why they were deprived of services, the waivers that the parents signed to take them out of services, and to provide them with those services from this point forward. Also to train a number of teachers in ESL so that they could work with the students more effectively.
So, and one of the other things that was brought up was the lack of communication with parents who may not speak English themselves in their native language. And what kind of an impact does that have?
There was an interim judgment in 2016 that said that paperwork had to be, or waivers had to be signed, or any letters had to be signed by parents, and it had to be presented to them in their native language so that they knew what they were signing and how it was going to affect their children within the programs within the school department.
And so what kind of an impact has this had, and how can we go about fixing it?
You know, I want to go back to the fact that everyone has seen, or at least between the superintendent claimed that he didn't know that it went before the Department of Justice. The mayor didn't know anything about it going before them. More importantly, the city council didn't know that there was even this problem within the system. And yet we have, you know, paperwork or complaints that date back to April of 2016, an interim judgment that came out in August of 2016, another interim judgment that came out in August of 2017, and a final review of it that came out in March 8th of 2018. Money had been appropriated to deal with the problems. City Council didn't know where that money was going or why it was being appropriated, and yet everyone doesn't know about it. It's amazing. It's mind-boggling. And yet the students are the ones that are suffering for it, 8,000 students.
And so who do you think, when it comes down to it, who do you think is responsible?
I have to say that the blame is right at the top, you know, with the mayor. There has to be some accountability as to who knew what, when, where those dollars went, why they were even appropriated for the school department if everyone knew that there wasn't a problem, and yet there was a problem. And you know, state funds being used, federal funds being used to deal with this, it has to rest at the top.
And if you were to be elected mayor, what steps would you take to help prevent this from happening in the future, as well as to help backfill the problems that we're seeing?
The backfill is a real serious issue to me because of the number of students involved, the number of years that they may have been deprived of services, the fact that we are looking at test scores yearly and saying, why is there a decline? Why aren't our English language learners doing better than what we expected to do with all the services? And now to say that, well, this could be a cause of it because the funds weren't really going into the programs that they were supposed to go into is real hard for me to believe. It's like, how do you fix this problem? Do you say, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was happening. Well, try and tell 8,000 parents that you didn't know what was happening, and all of a sudden, you know, those students have graduated and going out into the community and can't find jobs and stuff. It's a real disservice to them, and it's really an injustice to them. I, as mayor, will surround myself with enough people, knowledgeable people, that know how to solve the problem, that know how to correct the problem, that know how to work with teachers to get them certified to deal with these students, to train administrators to deal with the teachers in the room, and also to have as much communication as possible so that these acts of omission don't happen again.
And how does this impact the community as a whole? You mentioned these students are graduating, some of them aren't at the proficiency that they need to be at, they haven't learned what they need to learn. How does this have a ripple effect on the rest of the city?
You know, we have the state and the city are talking about jobs and placing people in employable positions. And when you have students or high schools that are graduating, 58% of their people, 62% of their students, even 70% of the students. The highest one in Providence is classical with 97% of the students graduating. You're saying, where can these students go? You have a governor that's bringing in high-tech industry into the state and saying, I am creating jobs for the people within the state. And yet you have a school system that cannot fulfill the need for getting these students placed in those high-paying jobs and, you know, technology-rich jobs. It's really a disservice to the whole.
And how pervasive is this issue within the city of Providence specifically? How many students as a percentage are affected?
That represents about 30% of the student population, the 8,000 students, yes.
So it's a big issue.
30% of the students and belonging to a family, 60% of the families have a non-English speaking family. So it's a ripple effect, you know, down the road. It's an injustice. It has to be solved. These students are our most valuable product within the city of Providence. We have to do everything possible to find the dollars to solve this problem and to make sure it does not happen again.
And so pivoting a little bit, what are some of the other big issues that you're focusing on in your campaign?
Well, for the city of Providence, there are a number of issues. First of all, speed cameras are going to be introduced again beginning September 4th. This is not what the community wants. There are too many people that are having to make a choice between paying a fine or putting food on the table or making rent payments. This speed cameras has been one of the cornerstones of my campaign, that they will immediately be eliminated. The people will be refunded whatever fines that they have paid back, and that those infractions will be taken off their records.
What do you think, say, a better solution then? The issue is people speeding in school zones.
Well, there are people speeding now to avoid the speed cameras. They're taking shortcuts through neighborhoods just to get around that fact because they have been caught by them once, and they don't want to pay the fines again. We can put in speed bumps. We can put in small traffic circles in the intersections. You know, we can employ people by actually putting in crossing guards that are out there directing traffic. I mean, that would be a two-way gift to say some people are employed, and we're also solving the safety issue.
So you think the speed cameras, there's no benefit to them?
At present, I believe that there's no benefit to them. I think that too many people are suffering because of them. The statistics show 36,000 tickets in a span from December to June. People are getting ticketed between 7 o'clock at night, Saturdays and Sundays. Now, I know some of those regulations have been adjusted a bit, but people are still going to be driving around the block trying to avoid those cameras. And now we have more of them in place. We've almost tripled the amount that we have in place, up to 15 of them.
And so going back, what were some of the other issues that you were discussing that you think are most important?
You have the
for
sale
Providence?
of the water supply board, which I believe many of the council candidates and also some of the city council people are against, saying that you don't trade a valuable asset to reduce the pension deficit. You have the Fane office tower that a lot of people are against, and that are saying that it's in the wrong place, that they don't want to come out and be against jobs, because we want jobs for the city of Providence, we want jobs for the state of Rhode Island, but to put a 600-foot structure in a vacant piece of land as a sole building just doesn't make sense to them, and you're going through and trying to do adjustments to various city ordinances and codes to make this building possible. You have the education piece, that's a major piece. You have safety in the streets, safety in the neighborhoods, that's a very important issue. There's a laundry list of things that we could go over.
And so we're here in downtown Providence. You're saying a lot of people are against the Fane Tower. They think it's a bad placement. Right over here in front of us, we have the Superman building.
Correct.
Sat empty for a while. What do you think is the future for the building?
Well, I said several weeks ago when I appeared on GoLocal that my campaign poster is the one that you have on your window there with the Superman building lit up, and I promised the taxpayers within the city of Providence that that building will be lit up at the end of the my initial four-year term as mayor. That building cannot go to waste. It's an icon within the city. These same developers are looking to put up new buildings. Those same types of incentives can be put into that building and tried to make useful again. So that building, immediately efforts will be made to get tenants into that building and make it valuable.
And what if the debate that some say it's not even salvageable because the facade is so eroded and the limestone needs so much work to get it back to where it needs to be? Do you think that's a hurdle that can be overcome?
I think that once someone gets in there and looks at it and sees the type of structure it is, the beauty of that interior lobby, you know, the upstairs, the walls, some walls may be taken in. I know that there are internal problems with the elevators and with airflow and stuff, but someone with enough ingenuity and with the right types of incentives can certainly make an old structure valuable again. Yes.
Hopefully that's the case, and we can see the lights in the Superman building someday soon.
You have an excellent view of it.
We do. It's right out here in front of us, right here in downtown Providence. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, shedding some light on some of the issues of education and some other big issues here in downtown Providence. So thanks so much for joining us today. And
thank you for having me. Great. Pleasure.
And that does it for us today here on GoLocal Live. Kate will be back tomorrow with your early kickoff to the weekend at noon. Till then, you can stay up to date on the latest in news, politics, and everything else in Rhode Island on GoLocalProv.com. Here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center, I'm your GoLocal Live host, Rachel Nunes.